This is a levitator. It's not magic, it's not magnets, and it's not being held by a string. The mechanism which allows this object to levitate is all around us. Pause. This is me. Well, it was me in July of 2023 after building what is known as an acoustic levitator in my garage. You see, I needed to prove to myself without a shadow of doubt that it really was possible to levitate objects using only sound. And once this amazing fact, which I was never taught in school, was seen with my own eyes, it gave a whole new perspective to the outstanding acoustic properties exhibited in many ancient structures. With such staggering architectural and technological feats still unexplained, such as the Pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, and Nan Madol, it became clear that our current narrative of ancient history and technology was ignorant to say the absolute least. But what knowledge of vibration were these ancient people actually enlightened to, and what historic structures may have been a result of applying this knowledge? Now, I know you may already be halfway through YouTube comments saying, "You're stupid, read a physics book," but before you post that spectacular criticism, at least let me state my case in full. Don't worry, we'll get into the physics later. The year is 1939. A Swedish doctor by the name of Dr. Jarl was on his way to Egypt for the English Scientific Society until he was stopped by a young acquaintance and asked to come to Tibet in order to treat a High Lama, a high-ranking monk. Dr. Jarl made the long journey by plane and yak caravan into the mountains where the monastery is located. He spent some time treating the Lama and living among the Tibetan monks, seeing and learning things usually closed off to outsiders. And after healing the Lama as a sign of gratitude, his newfound friends in the monastery wanted to show him something he would never forget. They took him to a sloping meadow surrounded by high cliffs, and on one of the walls of these cliffs there was a protruding platform 250 meters high. In the centered area of this valley there was a stone bowl said to have a diameter of 1 meter and a depth of 15 centimeters. A radius of 63 meters was then measured out and lined 90 degrees or a quarter circle with 13 drums of large, medium, or small size and 6 Tibetan trumpets called ragdons. These trumpets were very large, and behind each instrument stood rows of monks. Soon a very heavy stone block said to be 1 meter wide and 1.5 meters long was carried by yaks and placed into the center bowl. The monks then began playing their instruments and chanting to no avail until after 4 minutes, as their tempo increased, the block began to rock and sway before suddenly taking off vertically into the air. The stone followed a parabolic arc for 3 minutes until reaching the 250-meter high platform. This was said to be repeated multiple times to transport many different large stone blocks. Dr. Jarl, of course, was shocked and almost in disbelief. And at risk of not sounding psychotic, he made 2 films showcasing this near magical display of acoustics. On his return to the English Scientific Society, he was excited to showcase these films and expand our understanding of science and vibration. But he didn't receive the warm welcome he expected. Instead, his films were immediately confiscated, with one source claiming they were supposedly set to be released in 1990, but as of 2024, this is still unrealized. If anything, this confiscation validates the science-defying technology that must have been on display in that film. For some reason, some very powerful person was afraid of the damage this film could cause, possibly to our understanding of the world, to the superiority of Western technology, to our profitable reliance on energy and machinery, and who knows what else. But you cannot hold the truth back for long. As in the 21st century, this technology is finally making a resurgence in the West. Acoustic levitators, like the one I built last year, utilize a strangely similar structure to that recorded by Dr. Jarl 8 decades ago, well before the idea of an acoustic levitator even existed in the West. You see, they both utilize a concentric circular geometry. This allows sound waves to converge and amplify in the center around the object which is to be levitated. In modern levitators, very high frequencies are needed so that only small objects can fit within their wavelengths. But for a meter-wide stone block, a lower frequency with a larger wavelength would be needed. You see, this may be why the specific large instruments and chants were necessary. In any case, Dr. Jarl witnessed something extraordinary and scientifically still unexplainable, threatening to unravel a conspiracy that may still be under our noses today. What other significant knowledge of history and science may still be confiscated because of its threat to challenge the systematic misunderstanding of the world around us? To start, let's take a look at the centerpiece of this conversation on ancient civilizations and their technology.
The fact that it took an enormous amount of effort to make and move and put it into place.
How on earth did they do it? Where did that knowledge come from?
Have to be laying a stone roughly once every 3 minutes.
The Great Pyramids of Giza. It's not every day that someone decides to haul 2.3 million 2.5-ton granite and limestone blocks through the desert in order to build a big triangle. The internal structure and comparative size of the Great Pyramid alludes to the notion that it may have been something more than just a burial tomb for the pharaoh Khufu. After all, why go to such great architectural and engineering lengths to build one single tomb just for it to fail at its one job, which was to protect from thieves taking the body? No, it's clear the Egyptians knew much more than we give them credit for and were aiming at something bigger. Take, for example, the perimeter of the Great Pyramid and divide it by twice its height. You'll get within a fraction of the constant pi. Then take the radius of the Earth and divide it by the original height of the Great Pyramid at 481 meters, and you will get close to 43,200, which is a recurring number of significance across biblical, ancient, and mythical texts. But we'll save the sacred geometry for a future video. Also, consider the fact that the Great Pyramid was actually measured by physicists to be able to actually concentrate certain frequencies of electromagnetic energy in its chambers and underneath its base. The other insane part of this fact is that this discovery was actually used to develop pyramidal nanoparticle technology that's being applied to create more efficient solar cells than any previous existing structure. This is mind-blowing. The ancient Egyptians from thousands of years ago are teaching us how to harness wavelengths of light between 300 and 900 nanometers, which is being applied to improve modern technology that we are using to help save the planet. Bravo, Egypt. One theorist named Christopher Dunn was actually influenced by these resonant properties to create a theory saying that the pyramids were built to harness electricity from the earth. This may propose more questions than it answers, but it is profound to consider the pyramids could have been piezoelectric transducers, as Dunn suggests, by compressing crystals to create energy, coincidentally in the exact same way that the speakers and the acoustic levitator I built create sound. Nikola Tesla actually had a similar theory about the pyramids and spent much of his life trying to access the resonance of the earth to create limitless energy, only to have these potential diagrams and technological blueprints confiscated by the FBI following his death. I did a video on all this as part of my 4-part series on sound, vibration, and energy, so check that out to learn more about this specific technology. Now, I do not claim to know how exactly these pyramids were built, but it's safe to say that there is no current feasible explanation for how ancient Egyptians were able to cut, transport many miles, lift, and precisely arrange 2.3 million blocks with some weighing up to 80 tons. But according to one 10th century description by historian and famous traveler Abul al-Musadi, he claims to somehow know that the stones which built the pyramid were actually levitated. His story goes that a papyrus paper would be placed under the stone, which would then be struck by a metal rod, allowing the stone to be levitated and moved a distance of roughly 50 meters until it would settle to the ground. Could it be that the Egyptians used that rod to vibrate the stones at a certain frequency, allowing them to be moved freely by some science far outside our modern scope? There are still many aspects of the Great Pyramid that we do not fully understand, such as the unique acoustic properties of the king's chamber. Just imagine for a second we lived in a world where all ancient megalithic structures were destroyed thousands of years ago. Now imagine some archaeologist in that world claiming that ancient Egyptians or Mayans actually were capable of constructing precise massive structures even beyond our current technological capabilities. Everyone would say to this archaeologist, "That's impossible, you're crazy. What do you think they built these supposed structures with? Magic?" Because the truth is, these things really are so strange, and completely tremendous, sticking out like a sore thumb in our common narrative of ancient history. But there they are: Stonehenge, Puerto del Sol, the Pyramids, Gornaya Shoria, Jarl, Nan Madol, and much more. Beautiful, impossible, profound. I mean, just truly magical. And you may say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but what does this have to do with sound? Everything. It turns out the majority of these structures have a lot to do with sound. First off, let's look at Stonehenge. With originally 80 stones up to 30 tons, moved distances over 180 miles, it's clear there was a strong practical motivation for this structure. First thought to be some kind of cosmic clock or holy site, which is still likely possible, its structure also provides a unique acoustic purpose as well. When a scaled-down model of Stonehenge was recreated by Trevor Cox and his group of researchers, they found that sound actually reverberated towards the center of the structure and almost completely dissipated outside of it. This would make the acoustics very loud and clear within the inner center, but almost impossible to hear anything from outside of it. Different theories exist for why this is. Some think elites within an ancient society may have had important discussions or events inside, or maybe it was for specifically amplifying or enhancing music within the structure. But once again, like in the case of the Tibetan monks and acoustic levitators, we see a concentric circular structure, almost harnessing and converging specific frequencies of sound around a point. We'll get more into the cymatic structures and the actual science of vibration and matter later in the video, but for now it's clear to see the builders of Stonehenge had some knowledge and use of sound incorporated into the design of this megalith. Second off, let's look at the Egyptian Temple of Esna. I was not able to find any other information about this specific event featured on the wall at the Temple of Esna, but here's a really great description of this very intriguing carving posted by Stargate Voyager on YouTube.
This is Esna temple dedicated to the ram-headed Neter Konom. We are looking to a very important scene from ancient Egypt. That scene is called the Levitation of the Temple. This is officially the front side or the front gate of the temple. So what is happening? That it seems that the temple is surrounded with a kind of an energy field. And if you look carefully, this is the ground level and the field of energy touching the ground level. But the temple itself is above the ground. And the king is holding that energy field with his hand. And these tools are helping this magical effect to happen.
This image of giants levitating the massive temple by some force field seems to the average person like nothing more than a story. But instead of brushing it under the rug this way, we should think deeper about what they were trying to describe. Because when asking how the Esna temple or any megalith was built, who better to answer that question than the ancients themselves? I mean, these mythologies, structures, oral traditions, and artworks, if you think about it, are really the ancients' attempts at speaking to the future, at speaking to us. They must have been saying something that was so important to them that it was worth basically moving mountains and building something so spectacular and beautiful that would withstand the wars, gods, and winds of time. So let's do more than just look at this next one. Let's listen. Third, we have the ancient architecture of South America. Now, I grouped all of these together because there are so many insane structures in South America, and the simple truth is, we know very little about any of it. The video example I just showed you is from Chichen Itza, built by the Mayans and located in the Yucatan Peninsula. This structure is significant because once again in this ancient culture isolated from the rest of the world, we see an advanced knowledge of acoustic architecture, so precise that they are able to simultaneously replicate both the sound of the sacred Quetzal bird and the rattle of a snake just from a single clap. But the real reason I wanted to mention South America is because of the sheer magnificence when it comes to the size, intricacy, and impossibility of these megaliths found throughout the continent. Just take Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, featuring stones weighing up to 130 tons, moved up and down the high altitude mountain regions distances over 90 miles. Just imagine the technology and skill needed to transport these colossal stone blocks up to 12,600 feet above sea level, where we find the Puerto del Sol. And something else very curious about this site are the massive H-shaped figures, which are also featured on the belts of the bringers of civilization, similarly found throughout many ancient cultures across the entire planet. And so precise are the measurements and cuts of the 125 stone blocks that not even a single sheet of paper can fit between them. Keep in mind, this is after thousands of years of wear and tear, and without the use of any mortar or grout. We see similar architectural marvels at Machu Picchu, Periaba, Ollantaytambo, Easter Island, the list goes on. And levitation theories aside, the crazy part is we don't even really know who built much of these. Some descendants of Incas believe they were actually built by an even earlier civilization, like possibly the Olmecs or another people entirely. Now, before we get into the next one, please do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. As a small YouTuber trying to make sense of many different complex topics and our place in the cosmos, I promise it means a lot to me. Now back to the video. The fifth and possibly most unfathomable and mysterious ancient structure of all, we have Gornaya Shoria. For a lot of people, this may be the first time ever seeing or hearing about this massive rock wall located in modern-day Siberia. High in the Shoria Mountains at 4,000 feet elevation, explorers in 2013 found this 130-foot rock wall with single blocks as large as 3,000 to 4,000 tons. In order to protect the commonplace narrative of ancient technology, some believe that this rock wall is a natural formation. But this cannot be exclusively concluded one way or another, and I personally believe there is at least some element of human influence. Sixth, and finally, we have Nan Madol. According to local Micronesian legend, it is said the 50-ton log-shaped stones were levitated into place by two twin sorcerers who traveled in from the west. Keep in mind, this was relatively recent, about 1200 to 1500 AD, and one of these sorcerers even sired the Saudelir dynasty that historically ruled the local islands for centuries to follow. Is this levitation story just an ancient fabrication, or is there some truth embedded in it? Why would these people attribute their own hard work to some foreign sorcerers? This is another one of those examples of the ever-recurring bringers of civilization with advanced technological abilities popping up in many different cultures. How can this all be a coincidence? Obviously, we cannot get to every megalithic structure today, as that is not the purpose of this video, but I will briefly glaze over some honorable mentions before getting into some cymatics in the science of vibration. We have Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which may be as much as 12,000 years old. Baalbek, Lebanon, featuring a wall of stone, some weighing 800 tons, with nearby Hajar el-Hibla weighing 1,500 tons. El Nazla Rock, cut perfectly down the middle in Saudi Arabia. The Yangshan Quarry in China, with one cut stone weighing an estimated 16,250 metric tons. Obviously, there are too many megalithic structures of this sort to mention in one video, but you get the idea. The ancients had advanced knowledge, strong motivation, and sophisticated technological capabilities. Now let's get into what sound can really do. In Eastern traditions, specifically Hinduism, certain mantras or repeated phrases have been studied and shown to have profound physiological and mental effects on the well-being of an individual. Sounds like the Om, for example, are mythologically significant and often attributed to the creation of the cosmos itself. And profoundly enough, the Amen sound in Christian tradition is remarkably similar. I did a whole video on sound and religion as a part of this series, so check it out if that interests you. Hindus also appear to have been aware of the cymatic properties of vibration, as featured on carvings found throughout Hindu temples. In the Vitala temple, we see unique acoustic properties made by tapping specific musical pillars. Alongside what look like modern-day three-dimensional cymatic patterns, we can tell the builders had an advanced knowledge of sound and its ability to manipulate matter. Fast forward to the modern day Western world, and we are slowly rediscovering the geometric and physical transformations that can occur purely as a result of vibration. Hans Jenny was a mid-20th century Swiss physician and natural scientist who coined the term cymatics. Cymatics is essentially the study of how sound vibration transforms and shapes matter. This works through vibrating a plate or some surface at a specific frequency and seeing the patterns formed by matter on this surface. The frequency then determines the distance between the areas of compression and rarefaction, and as with any sound wave, higher frequency means a smaller wavelength or gap between these areas. This interaction between high vibrational areas and low vibrational areas form a modal vibrational pattern. All physical objects have normal modes or vibrational patterns which are dependent on their structure, material, and shape. In the case of cymatics, this sinusoidal modal pattern, meaning sine wave with frequency, interacts with the applied frequency to allow for many different geometric shapes to form when sand or a fluid-like material is scattered on the surface. Just look at even three-dimensional structures emerging from the surface and seemingly transcending traditional Newtonian physics by only the power of vibration. A higher vibration can be used to form increasingly intricate and complex geometric shapes, and even dynamic moving forms that can almost resemble natural biological forms. What is being displayed here is the way that sound and vibration interact with matter is much different than how matter interacts with other matter. Obviously, these vibrations take place in matter, but the vibration or wave itself, as we know, is made of energy, not matter. And through this specific frequency energy, we see complex, naturally forming geometrical structures. Consider this alongside the fact that every molecule and every atom in the universe has a specific resonant frequency. These resonant frequencies are determined by the unique structure and cyclical pattern of the atoms. Could it be possible that the ancients, through sound and harmonics, were able to access the resonance of materials and levitate them by some mechanism yet unknown to us? Is this why they made an intention of cutting and transporting sometimes hundreds of miles specific granite or limestone blocks that they knew they were able to manipulate? I mean, we know that levitation by sound is possible. I proved that in the very outset of this video. The science of these levitators is pretty simple, really. High frequency sound waves create a standing wave which contains areas of compression and rarefaction. These areas of rarefaction allow small objects to be held in place by the pressure of the compressed air which surrounds it. So really, it is the air fundamentally that is supporting the weight of the object, but the energy to support it comes from the sound. Hypothetically, if one were able to compress enough air by very loud and concentrated sound, like that witnessed by Dr. Jarl, it could maybe be possible to support objects of a much larger mass. I did do another video on some of the new technology coming out relating to sound and new medical treatments, like the reduction of tumors by sound, so if you're looking for more in this direction, then check that out. This is all not to say that I or anyone knows if or how ancients were able to levitate massive objects. If I knew how to do it on a large enough scale, I would already be a tech entrepreneur billionaire or mysteriously vanished. FBI. But obviously, the secret still remains a secret. This video series rather serves to suggest that more of our universe is substantiated by vibration and resonance than we often acknowledge. And it seems the more we uncover about physics and the underlying workings of the universe, the more this non-particular and vibrational perspective seems almost all-encompassing. So the ancient levitation hypothesis is, after all, a historical narrative based on this perspective. But in acknowledging it as a narrative, we must also acknowledge the more mainstream Western narratives by which we examine and make conclusions about ancient civilizations, their technology, beliefs, and motivations. In all honesty, I hope it's true that this great power does actually exist and may point to a more grand and unified understanding of the cosmos and humanity's place in it, but I really don't know if it's true or not. The best we can do is take the knowledge and understanding that we have and try to expand on it and fill in the rest of the picture. All theories and narratives aside, here are some concrete things that you can take from this video. Number 1. Ancient civilizations valued a divine connection to sound and vibration and believed that it had transformative or cosmic capabilities. Number 2. There is a lot we simply do not know or understand about not only ancient history, but the actual way the universe works. Number 3. Acoustic levitation and vibrational capabilities should be explored as a very enlightening scientific and technological frontier with potentially huge paradigm-shifting discoveries waiting to be found. Number 4. There are many pieces of evidence and stories that point to advanced technology or something that defies our current understanding of ancient humans. All this taken together, we can see that there is much of the cosmos waiting to be discovered, or more accurately, rediscovered. Something profound, exciting, uplifting, possibly even a great source of human meaning. We should not reject ancient stories or assert the superiority of our cosmological worldview. Instead, we should take as much as we can and learn from the people who suddenly woke up to their place in the cosmos and discovered and knew so much just by witnessing and growing with the natural world. The ones who wrestled constantly with life and death, face to face with the ground of being while dreaming up at the stars. Not distracted from themselves, but rather in touch, simply with being uniquely and suddenly human. This human connection with sound and vibration runs deep down to the soul. I made a video on that in this series, so go ahead and give that a view. Also, please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and leave a comment. And as always, never stop questioning, talking, and thinking. Thank you.